Yes, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening would be appropriate. Welcome to the CSM Mastermind, everyone. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and our success coaching training program. We're back for our monthly live webcast today, talking about having difficult conversations. And from the looks of it, a lot of people that are challenged with that. So hopefully we'll give you some value from this. This free learning event is brought to you by Success Coaching, the world leader in customer success professional development training with nearly 15,000 students globally. Our training programs are available in a variety of formats, from self-paced online learning to virtual instructor-led boot camps. We're now accepting registrations for our summer 12-week live coaching programs that are being offered in conjunction with the University of San Francisco School of Management. Really excited about that partnership with the school. We also have a number of standalone courses taught by industry experts, including data-driven decision-making, having difficult conversations led by our guest, Anita Toth, and change management for customer success, outcome-based selling, and what successful managers do, a management training and coaching program for those looking to move into leadership roles. Find out more at successcoaching.co. Ashley will also drop a link into the chat for everybody. For those of you that haven't participated in one of these events before, this is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic relevant to customer success. Regardless of the company that you work for, the scope of your role, or the sizes of the customers that you deal with, we aim to pick topics that are going to be practical and useful to you. The schedule for our upcoming events can also be found at successcoaching.co. Click on the events tab at the top of the page to find out more. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar, we lost the housekeeping slide there. It's not happening. That's okay. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is recorded, and we'll be posting a replay along with a transcription. There it is, a transcription on our website early next week. We will be taking questions later on during the webinar, so please don't be shy and use that Q&A button found at the bottom of your screen to ask or upvote a question. We're also broadcasting on LinkedIn Live and have somebody monitoring that feed. So if you're watching us on LinkedIn Live and you've got a question, post it and they will relay it to us. Also, please keep all commentary to the chat window. Now, there's a lot of thought leadership out there, along with a lot of theories about how to deliver customer success. In this series, we focus on the practical, real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those that are practicing customer success out in the wild on a daily basis. And to do that, we invite three panelists to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are people who are great at their craft, and we ask them to share their experiences with us and their perspectives. So without further ado, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves to y'all, talk a bit about who they are and what they do. So let's get started as usual in alphabetical order with Anita.
Hi, everyone. My name's Anita Toth. I had mentioned I'm from Canada, specifically just outside Toronto. You're going to occasionally hear the word a, and I believe it's about. So representing the North here. I am, as Andrew mentioned, one of the trainers with Success Coaching, specifically with the Difficult Customer Conversations course. If you're struggling and you want, to learn a little bit more, and actually what we do is practice some scenarios, check out that course, and, would love to have you in the next session if you can make it. And what I do otherwise is I'm a chief churn crusher. That's the title that I've given myself. And my agency helps customer success leaders and CCOs reduce churn, primarily through customer insights via their voice of the customer programs.
Awesome. Thanks, Anita. Jonathan, you and your shoes are up.
Thanks so much, Andrew. So, guys, my name is Jonathan Davis. I reside in Boston. I wish it was a little bit warmer than it was, but it's not. You may see a Raiders paraphernalia back there. I do not like the Patriots, even though I am from Boston, born and raised. And you might see a couple of sneakers back here. Yes, I love sneakers. My oldest son's name is Jordan for a reason. I am a manager of enterprise customer success at Cobalt.io in cybersecurity. We focus on penetration testing. I've been in customer success for the better part of 10 years now. I've been in cybersecurity for about 7 years, and I really genuinely and truly enjoy it. I actually got introduced to success coaching via during the pandemic. Actually, I was on I think it was I forget which event it was. It was a customer success event, and someone was talking about, being certified as a CSM. And I'm like, I've been in CS for about 10 years. How come I've never heard about being a certified customer success manager? So I did my due diligence, and I actually got the company to now certify all of our CSMs from 1 through 5. Every single one of our customer success managers will be certified as a customer success manager. So the program is amazing, and I love it, Andrew. I just want to kind of give you some kudos there. But I'm super excited to have this conversation with you lovely ladies, and Andrew yourself. I'm very passionate about customers, and having difficult conversations kind of drives me. It excites me to have a hard conversation. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate the shout out for the program. Jonathan was not compensated for that.
I wasn't.
As a matter of fact, it wasn't even planned.
But I'll take a pair of sneakers if you want to send them my way, Andrew.
I got to find something special for you. So, all right. Thanks, Jonathan. And finally, Carla.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carla Cannon. I do not suffer from cold here. I'm in Miami. And so perpetual summer here. I am originally from Mexico, so a big hola to everybody that speaks Spanish. I have been in customer-facing roles for the majority of my career here. I work at Burst Street Systems. It's a procure-to-pay solution. We service the hospitality industry, so we are very familiar with dealing with customers that service other customers. And prior to working at Burst Street, I was with Four Seasons for 10 years, so it's a great school about how to actually understand and anticipate your customers' requirements. So very excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, you got a little bit of hospitality down there in Florida, don't you?
A little bit.
Just a little bit.
Just a couple hotels,
Yeah, a few things. There's a mouse or something too down there.
Yeah, well, the mouse is fighting right now with Florida.
It's all over the news.
Yes.
But we it's interesting. We get a lot of folks from hospitality coming into customer success. It makes sense, right? Your job in hospitality is to make sure the customers gets what their desired outcome is, gets what they need, make them happy.
Yeah, it's about creating experiences, if you think about it, which is along the lines of what we do when we do customer success. Is enable that journey and make an experience.
Right, exactly. And once again, I appreciate all your time, by the way. But sometimes that journey isn't all it's cracked up to be. Sometimes we can't do what the customer is looking for us to do, or something isn't going to go right. And so today's topic definitely seems to be a popular one. We had more than 660 registrations. We got 256 people. I think this is the most people we've had on a webinar in a long time. So what happens when we're concerned about or avoid having difficult conversations? I had an experience with a former team member who had a problem having difficult conversations. This particular team member held a project oversight role, which is a very dangerous role to have if you have a hard time having difficult conversations. And maybe it was with this particular customer, but it was, and not others. But with one of our larger customers, there were things that the customer was expecting the product to do that were not possible. Right? Functionality that was well outside of what the platform could handle, especially given their operating environment. The functionality could be custom built at a cost, which was not ideal for a variety of reasons. But instead of raising this issue early on, when it became apparent that the expectations were misaligned, this individual chose not to have the difficult conversations with both the sales team and the customer. And part of that may have been because our CEO at the time was involved in those negotiations and was part of setting those expectations incorrectly. But it ended up costing the company well north of 6 figures, and ultimately this individual's job with the company, which was unfortunate. Right? So why do people not want to have difficult conversations?
because they're hard to have. I think that, they are tough, and for a variety of reasons that we'll get into today, but notwithstanding that, it's hard to hear that you've disappointed somebody. It's hard to hear that you might not be able to help them out when that's what you're looking to do. I mean, those are just two big factors. There's certainly more than that, but they are tough to have. It takes courage, shall I say, to be able to walk into these and into the unknown. And I think that's really the biggest part is you don't know which way it's going to go. You don't know the emotions. You don't know the outcomes. It's not as easy perhaps as some other conversations that you routinely have with customers. And that's anxiety producing. And so it takes courage to step into these conversations.
They're uncomfortable. They're so uncomfortable, right? This is awkwardness to having that discussion.
Yeah. And I think the reality is as a customer success professional, we want to please everybody, right? Our job is to get on these calls with our customers, make sure that they're getting what they want, make sure that they're happy, and make sure everything is smooth. So when you know you're about to enter a conversation that's difficult, I think you put yourself in a position of what am I going to do and how am I going to handle this? And if you're not confident in your own abilities, or if you're not armed with the right conversation pieces, or you don't prepare enough, I think the conversation could go far left. And you may not be ready to handle that.
And that word that you just said, preparation, is so key. And I do see in the chat that it says, how do I prepare? I think if we go down that route of talking about preparation, for me, it's a lot of, you have to have a feeling of what kind of conversation you're going into. Because if you don't know, it's because you have not really been in tune with your customer. And for me, it's a lot about like being prepared, understanding what I'm going to walk into, what areas might be impacting the customer that is going to lead to these challenging conversations. So really knowing your customer and understanding what you're going to walk into, and that work that you do ahead of time to prepare. When you're preparing your agendas for your calls with your customers, you should know what sticking points are going to be there, because that preparation then allows you to react to it, but in a way that you are better set for the discussion. But I do want to caveat that preparing doesn't mean like writing a script, right? You don't show up there and be like, hello, customer, because you want to make sure that is a natural approach, and you don't really know what they're going to come back with. So you cannot script it out, but you can prepare for it.
But if you know your customer and you're exercising that empathy muscle, which can be a double-edged sword, the empathy can actually hurt. It can make it more challenging, right? But if you're exercising that empathy muscle, you can at least, put yourself in their shoes. Say, how would this person, knowing what I know about them, how would they react to what I'm about to tell them?
Yeah, and I think reacting, right, and Carla, you mentioned it, right? So you prepare so that you can react. And I would say on the flip side, try to be proactive and get ahead of it. Being proactive with your customers and trying to nip it in the bud before it actually gets to a point of escalation or a difficult conversation is also huge, right? I think being proactive with your customer base, it changes the narrative a lot of times, right? If you can, and again, this comes with being a seasoned CSM usually, or understanding your business really well. But if you can get ahead of things before that they happen, and you see and you can foresee that, I think it allows you to be well more prepared to give a difficult message to your customer, rather than them saying, hey, let's get on a call, I have some bad news to give you, and then you are now reacting to it and not necessarily prepared to react to that. I think that's one way to kind of get ahead of that as well.
Absolutely.
Are there certain trigger words that can make things most uncomfortable? I know that one of my superpowers with my son, my 20-year-old son, is when I tell him I'm disappointed in him about something. He doesn't disappoint me much at all. As a matter of fact, he doesn't disappoint me in years. But when he was younger, when I would say I'm disappointed, that would be worse to him than saying I was mad about something.
Yeah, I was actually with a group of CSMs today doing this training, and the one CSM described it that the word disappoint is like a punch in the gut. That the anger is actually easier to deal with than hearing that you disappointed or let a customer down. And so that's tough to come back from, because as much as we'd like to think that these are rational conversations, if we prepare in advance and then go into them, there's a huge emotional element from both sides. And so a word like disappoint can really, if you really feel it personally, it can be hard during these conversations to pull yourself out of that and then focus on getting back to the conversation at hand. So yes, there are definitely trigger words that have an emotional impact on both sides.
And I think one thing I would say is honestly, I've learned in my years of being in customer success is you cannot take things personally. Even though it's very difficult to do that, you have to remove the personal aspect of it. So you're not actually disappointing someone. And I think as a seasoned CSM, again, I'll say that it's that if you can actually look at it as hey, this is a business perspective, right? We are your partner. I'm not doing anything for you myself, right? You've come into partnership with my company and I am the face of that. And I understand that I'm going to have to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? But it's not a personal attack. I think it allows you being a CSM to kind of approach it in a different manner. And I do want to answer a question live here that did come in. I saw it in the chat and it was just put in Q&A. And that's what if overpromising happens during the sale and not during the implementation? I love this question because it happens so often. Customer success always kind of, from lack of better words, gets the shit end of the stick when it comes to sales overpromising, and we just have to kind of pick up the pieces. I would say this, never throw sales under the bus and say, oh, I'm sorry that they did that. I would never do that. Don't approach it in that way. Try to understand what the outcome needs to be. What is the customer expecting? What were the expectations that were set? And how can we now reset expectations, right? How can we deliver something to the customer that they were looking for during the sale? Sometimes that could be making the impossible possible, right? However, if you are now changing the conversation, hey, I don't have something to say, this is what I'm trying to accomplish, you can create a different narrative, right? It's a different conversation that you have. So it turns the immediate negative to how can I help you? What are you trying to accomplish? How can we get from A to B? And now you're giving them the positive aspect of it as opposed to staying into the negative. So personally, that's how I like to approach the often missell that happens. But inevitably, it's something that you need to be comfortable having the conversation about. And I don't know if you ladies have any other input.
100%. I think that a lot of the disappointment happens when expectations are not set right. And just like you said, you can't throw your teams under the bus. You are one company, you are representing that organization. So you are one single team. But because of that, I also like to work with our teams internally so they understand that customer success is an effort of the entire organization. We might have that title. We are the representatives of customer success, but it's the entire organization. So when you are able to frame that in front of your organization, it helps a lot of the sales process be smoother and make sure that, hey, this is for all of us to set the expectations right. Because if the sales team member is going to set the wrong expectations and now the customer has to deliver, guess what? They're still going to get mad at the sales team member down the line because they're not going to get what they were promised. So it doesn't really benefit anyone to go and overpromise. So I say, yes, just the tips that you gave on people, like how do you rebaseline that with your customer are fantastic. But also as customer success team members, we have to make sure that everybody understands the part that they play in customer success. And together we can frame the right expectations with the customer. So then we don't have to disappoint them.
And then we also need to take that additional step of following up with those misset expectations, the people who are missetting those expectations. Hey, we're not going to throw you under the bus, but at the same time, you need to set expectations appropriately. So how do we want to close that loop and fix that and address the root cause? Right? Because nobody likes having to do that over and over and over again. I've been in situations where I had a sales team that over and over and over again just refused to listen to us and refused to listen to the feedback and say, you can't say this to our customers.
It erodes the trust. Erodes trust with your customer. They're like, well, I don't know what else you promised me that you're not going to deliver. It doesn't benefit anyone, but I agree. No. It should be a learning exercise.
Well, it does benefit. It does benefit. So it's a very selfish benefit. Hey, I closed that deal, which means that I get cash in my bank account because I get commission on this deal. It's an incredibly selfish thing. Yeah. It's one thing if you make an honest mistake. Hey, everybody makes an honest mistake, right? Everybody should be able to make a mistake, but if it's consistently happening, then there's a problem there, and that's that. And then you need to address the selfishness of that, because to your point, it's something that affects the entire company.
Absolutely. There's a question in the chat that I would like to answer is, how do you manage it internally? If we constantly bail them out of the argument, could be that they never adjust this behavior. And, the way to do that is work with if it's sales, it could be any other department, but if it's your sales leadership, I will say, bring it up as a learning exercise for the entire team, because together they learn. And it's not about pointing fingers. You can do it as a team effort. Say, hey, let's just talk about some of the challenges that we had recently on accounts, and make that just a learning exercise for the entire team. You don't have to point fingers. If it's a repetitive offender, then I say, then just bring it one-on-one with the leadership team so they can address it. But at the end of the day, like I said, for us, it has been just an amazing exercise to see how our sales team now understands that we're in this together. Even if they were to get the commission, down the line, they're not going to be able to upsell or expand on the account because there's going to be no trust.
There's going to be no trust. Exactly. Right. And that affects them. That affects you. That affects the entire company. That affects everybody who's depending on a increasing customer lifetime value, which is what this is all about. Right. We're playing a long game. We can't play a long game with our customers if they don't trust us.
Yeah.
Right.
And that trust is I just wanted to say, Andrew, and that trust is very quickly eroded, but takes a long time to rebuild. And so again, it's critical with those expectations. And I wanted to say, when Jonathan was answering this question, to be able to address it in the moment, because that's something that happened in the past, but then, focus on building the relationship to the future. I think sometimes in these difficult conversations, if they're not managed well, the customer can feel like they're, you just leave them in that same cycle. At some point, it's okay. Let them have whatever they need to say. Let them have the space to have it, and then gently guide the conversation to what can we now do going forward. And I think that's a really important point here, is that this is not a venting session. They're not there to just dump everything on you, but there is structure to the conversation that can move it forward.
But you need to let them vent.
Absolutely.
They gotta let them offload their frustration, their disappointment, their anger.
Yep.
Right. You can't let that, because it doesn't help them. It doesn't help you if you want to move on.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because they've got that all bottled up.
Yeah.
And take that time.
Yeah.
Take that time while they're venting to absorb what they're saying and think through, like, active listening to what they're saying.
Active listening. Yeah. Super
Because
important.
in there, when you actually respond, it's not going to be defensive, because sometimes when we have that feedback come at us and it's this venting, your immediate reaction is to be like, no, or you want to give them something so they stop, right? You want to give them a concession or some sort of discount. Listen, there's something in there that can tell you that it might not necessarily be solved with just throwing them a bone. It's about really solving the root cause. So I like to take the time, let the customer go through it, listen very well what they're saying, think through the plan before you respond, and it will be a better way of handling the situation if you just immediately go and try to defend yourself. It's not going to achieve anything.
And to your point, you use the right phrase there. It's active listening. It's not listening. Okay. It's active listening. We teach active listening, right? And active listening, super important skill in customer success. You need to turn off the email, the Slack, your phone, especially when you're dealing with a critical situation. Actually, you should be active listening whenever you're talking to somebody, quite frankly. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We need to listen twice as much as we speak, right? So we need to actively listen. We need to listen to what they're saying. We need to restate that in our own words to make sure we understand what the person is saying. We want to use we want to attach that emotional component to it. I understand you're angry, right? And we want to pause thinking about how we're going to respond until we've had a chance to take in all of this information and the emotion and then process that.
Yes.
Can I add something to this that is super helpful? And that is, and all of you have mentioned it, the word pause. That we're so wanting to just jump in and speak, that if you can even put like 10 seconds of just quiet after they've finished, the one thing I found is the customer then will often start speaking a little further once they've kind of got like the big stuff out and the emotions have come down a little bit. That silence is golden, because they will often fill it. and then provide you with like often those key nuggets that maybe didn't come out in the first, when they were just getting it all out. And then all of a sudden it just comes up on its own. You don't even necessarily have to ask for it, but you got to let the emotions cool, sit quietly for a few seconds. It is so awkward. It is so uncomfortable, but they will often, and then blah, blah, blah. And there it is. And it's like, that's really at the root of what's going on, or I can really work with this particular piece.
As Chris Voss refers to it in his book, Never Split the Difference, the things you didn't know, right? He calls those black swans, right? And that's and even though that book's on negotiation, there's so many great skills that he talks about in that book that can be applied to customer success, whether you are doing a discovery or you're dealing with a pissed off customer. Sorry, Jonathan, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, this is something that I really struggled with early in my career, right? Because I'm a doer. So I always wanted to answer people very quickly. Anybody that knows me knows I love to talk, right? So, and I always feel like I can fix a problem, right? I've always been a fixer. So
I noticed that you started answering questions right out of the gate.
See, there you go. But over time, I really learned from some of my leaders that, taking the time to hear. So you guys mentioned it, that pause, that making that uncomfortable silence. And oftentimes what happens then is that the customer now starts to kind of put themselves in a different position to now talk about what they need, right? It's not about the issues at hand and how mad they are. You have to listen to that. You need to let them vent, because if you try to attack and answer right away, they're going to feel like you didn't really listen or hear them, right? That active listening, we need to do that. But then when you let them kind of sit and revel in that for a second, then they start talking about the positive sides, right?
Yep.
It kind of switches. And that's where you really want to get them to, because then they're helping themselves. And now you can now be proactive in getting them what they're actually looking to accomplish. And it's like no other, right? And instead of you just trying to jump in and answer right away, it never helps. I learned that the hard way a couple of times. So I will completely wholeheartedly agree with you guys there.
Absolutely. I have this little card. I hope you can see it. So this actually sits on my desk for this reason. I hope, is it clear?
Yeah.
It just says stop talking, because I too would like 1 or 2 seconds and then boom, I'd be into something else. And this sits here. I see it all the time. And when I'm in those conversations and I can feel myself wanting to say something, I like look down and I'm like, no, Anita, hang tight, stop talking. And it's honestly, this little paper with 2 words on it has been a game changer for me.
Absolutely. Just as a practical example, I work into this business review and the customer was angry. So the customer marches in and she's like, bah, 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 and she keeps going, right? And, if you just sit quietly, once she was done venting, I kept listening and she goes, are you going to say something? It's like, I wanted to hear your feedback. And that little moment of that pause calms down, the situation, because all of a sudden there's this silence. And then I was able to start framing and guiding the conversation. And, towards the end, it turned into a partnership to see how else we could help them. And not everything was on our side. It was a partnership for resolution. But at the end of the day, if you walk in, and I did this role play, if you walk in and you immediately hear somebody screaming, the first thing you want to do is be like, how do I make it stop? Let me just give you something. Do you want a discount? I will give you free training. What do you want? I'll give it to you. Please just stop. And it actually, 2 things happen. You train the customer that the louder they scream, the more they can get. And you still don't know what's the actual problem. Like, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Because you are just so focused on the noise.
And so does confidence play a part in this, in these situations arising where people have a problem having those difficult conversations?
Well, confidence is built on practice. You don't just get confidence out of the gate. It's you're confident in your ability to deal with the situation. So, role playing is a great way to learn in a safe, supportive environment where you can get some coaching and feedback. It makes a big difference. But yeah, confidence comes from practice. It really does.
That's a big part of your training program is role play. As a matter of fact, I believe that it's some online learning, but most of the time that you spend with these folks is in the role play.
Yeah, we actually do a 2-hour session on role playing, and it's fantastic because again, it's supportive. You could do this in-house as well, right? And just practice even with another CSM. Like it doesn't have to be as formal as coming in. Of course, our course teaches more than just the role play, but the point is to give a little bit of confidence, some tools to go, all right, I know what are some things I can do when the conversation starts going sideways, how to bring it back. And then, again, fostering that discussion. And the more often you do it, the more, I don't want to say comfortable, but definitely confident you become that whatever, comes up in the conversation, you'll be able to handle it. You'll be able to cope with it.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys have ever used the product Gong. I know a lot of us use it. It's a great tool. And one of my senior CSMs actually gave me a really good tip that he started to give to some other CSMs. And now I tell absolutely everybody on it. And it's when you're listening to calls, and I always try to have my team share difficult conversations with others, right? But one of the tips that he provided was listen to the call. And when a customer has a question or they need something, pause it and see how you would answer it, right? Pause it before another CSM actually answers that question. Then you answer it yourself. Then you play, see how the other CSM answered it. See if it's the same. If it's different, what would you have answered differently based off of now what you heard? Then you can have a conversation with that CSM and say, why did you come to that? So that allows you to now put yourself in different positions and hear different things. It's a teaching tool without actually someone teaching you, right? So it just arms you with more the ability to speak about different situations in different ways that you might not be used to. So I really tell everybody, and that goes for anyone, even outside of CSMs, whenever you're dealing with conversations that could be difficult or anything, it's really helpful to have other people's perspectives. And sometimes asking someone might be a little bit difficult. You might make yourself feel uncomfortable. I always say revel in the uncomfortableness because it only makes you stronger at the end of the day. But it's a really good thing to use if you guys do have Gong or any type of phone recording in-house.
Absolutely. I think that the ability for you to sometimes question the reaction that you have and then, sort of chime it with your team members and see if that was the right approach or how they would have handled it. It does take a little bit of the ability for you to be uncomfortable with the feedback that you're going to get, but you learn so much. Role plays are amazing training tools. I love them. At times I've had the team play the angry customer and they love playing the angry customer. They don't like when they're on the receiving end, but the angry customer exercise is very good because it teaches us like, how would you react? And then get that feedback. Did you react correctly? Because then you train that muscle. And when you actually are in that uncomfortable situation, you might not have the exact scenario played out, but you have already been trained on how to react to it and how to approach it and how to manage it.
Yeah, you have to be okay with these challenging conversations. If you're in this role, you have to be okay with it, right? You have to be okay hearing the word disappointment. You have to be okay hearing negative feedback.
Yeah.
Right. And once again, it's tough. Typically people in customer facing roles and these types of roles, in customer success, in hospitality, we have high EQ, right? And with that high EQ comes more sensitivity to that sort of thing. But you have to be okay with hearing that. You have to be okay with also telling customers not what you think they want to hear, but what they need to hear.
Yes.
Yeah, it's another big thing is being okay with saying no. It's one of the hardest things I think a CSM has to deal with, and that goes from, and I've seen a bunch of messages in the chat and Q&A, especially with discounting when it comes to things that they're expecting or they were promised that you just can't actually do. You have to be okay with saying no, because at the end of the day, the reality is you cannot please everybody all of the time. As much as we would love to do that, that's in our nature. That's why we do what we do, right? That's why we're in this profession. However, the reality is sometimes you have to say no, and you have to be okay with that, regardless of the size of the customer. It can be your largest customer or your smallest customer. Being comfortable with saying no will take you a long way. And honestly, it usually will gain you the respect of the customer as well. If you BS a customer and tell them yes till you're blue in the face and then you can't ever deliver on those things, it's going to come back and it's going to bite you in the ass. If you were up front and you said, no, that's not possible, let's figure out an alternative. Let's see where else we can accomplish what you're looking to actually do. It'll take you a long way.
Our level 5 that we just released, Jonathan, has for your team has learning how to say no. Right smack dab in the middle of the 12 courses. So it's a super important skill. Hey, let's answer some more of these questions. We do have a question via LinkedIn from Michael. Michael, thanks for the question. How do you handle a conversation with a customer that believes they should be our number one priority, but based on their most recent renewal, they are not even in the top 50 accounts?
Every customer thinks that they're your biggest customer and the most unique customer. And look, every customer is, especially every customer is important. They all play a part in, in your, obviously in your ARR or your NRR. They all play a part on it. But I think that it depends on what the customer is asking you. Is the priority going to, I usually have like a decision tree where I go through and I say, is what the customer asking benefiting the entire customer base? If the answer is no, then it's not top priority. Is what the customer asking today going to benefit 80% of our customer base? No. So I think you have to think about where your customers ask is in the priority of your organization. If it's something just for them, it might not have to do with renewal. Maybe it will expand. Maybe they could be a referral. So it's very scenario based. But at the end of the day, every customer is important. What is important on your side is to understand how it sits in the priorities that you have and be open about it. So if they're asking you for something that is not going to add value to your product, your service, your organization, then it's having that conversation of, I hear you, I understand why you're asking that. We can have a discussion later on, whether that fits into our roadmap or, how will this work into an expansion. Is not something that we're going to put first and foremost right now, but I would love to run through that exercise or the use case that you have to understand how it actually will create effectiveness or any sort of dynamics in your organization. So they feel heard, they understand that you are listening to them, and then 3, that you're not dismissing the ask.
I think part of saying no effectively is pulling them closer to help them understand the decision-making process.
Absolutely. When I was at Four Seasons, one thing we learned is how to say no without saying no. And, Four Seasons is all about the customer service. And what it means that there's going to be situations where no is no. If it's something illegal, the guest is asking you obviously are going to say no. And you're like, I cannot get you cocaine, but let me get you another drug. No, you actually say no. But there are scenarios where, you don't say no flat out. You have to provide an explanation as to why this is not feasible or what alternative you can give them. So I always say, don't say no. Tell them why it's not feasible or how you can accommodate the ask differently, because they might want something very specific and you have a different solution to it, or it might not make sense to do that. So let's talk through that because we might have a different approach that we can take.
Well, I like also to approach things like that, situations like that, with something that Jonathan mentioned in the prep call on Monday, was really more geared towards the reasoning behind somebody having a problem having those difficult conversations, and that's using tools like the 5 whys. Help me understand what's behind this ask.
Absolutely.
Help me understand why you're asking to go down this path. But to your point, at the end of the day, we need to treat all our customers all with the same level of respect, but we're not going to treat all customers the same. This is it's simple unit economics. And so, Michael, that's some thoughts, some ideas on how to deal with that type of situation. Thanks for the question, by the way.
Oh, sorry, Andrew.
No, go
I wanted
ahead,
to
Andy.
just, before you jumped into another question, I just wanted to say, really, there's 2 levels we're working on. And Carla mentioned it when she was responding. There's the emotional ask and there's the rational ask. And what we often get is this rational ask, but really being driven by something emotional. And most of us have made this mistake, and you kind of learn, if you just deal with the rational and you don't address that emotional, such as saying like, all our customers, yes, they are important to us, and letting them know, then you're kind of in a world of trouble, because that sort of unaddressed emotional ask ends up just coming out in other ways. So really, you're dealing with those 2 levels at once, but the most important one is to the emotional first, to address it, to reassure them. Really, I think a lot of us are just looking for reassurance that everything's going to be okay, that we will be looked after. All of us know that we're as customers, we may not always be the top priority. That's when the rational part comes in. But if you can reassure then bring in the rational. This is the reason why, but this is, what we can do. I would say the majority of people will be okay with that.
Yeah, and I would also say letting them feel heard, right? And I think we've all mentioned it here, but allowing them to speak to maybe folks that can give them a better answer as to what they're trying to do, maybe not be able to be accomplished, right? Bringing them on a call with the product team, maybe speaking to marketing, regardless, let them feel heard, right? If they just feel like you're dismissive of them as a CSM, they may lose your trust. They may feel like, oh, Jonathan's just being dismissive. He doesn't really care about our needs. He's just going to brush it off to the side. So if you know in your heart of hearts that it is never going to happen, but you want them to feel like, hey, you may not be top dog on the customer totem pole. However, we still care about your ask and we want to hear it. Allow them to speak to someone else that may have a bigger impact or have some more feedback for them so that they can understand more of the why as to why it cannot happen or why it's not going to happen right now. I think that makes and sets a lot of customers feel at ease, right? They may not be spending $1 million with you. They may only be spending $10,000, but if the product team is hearing it directly from them, they can feel like they're a large customer, right? They feel like every customer has the same input.
So super important though with that strategy to remember is if you are going to escalate it to somebody else, that they toe the line, right? They toe the same line, right? Because the last thing that you want is for this customer to feel like, oh, well, if I push hard enough and I escalate, then I can get a different answer.
Internal expectation setting is huge. You got to do that as well, right? You need to all be on the same page. That's, that's cross-departmental collaboration, I think, in general, right? As long as everybody is on the same page and they know why we're doing it, it goes back to that why, right? The why are we even having this conversation? Having a prep call internally, say, hey, this is why we're doing what we're doing. And this is what we want to accomplish and get out of it for the customer. You tag team it. I think it can go successfully, but you're right. If you do not do that, it could go left really fast.
It could blow up. It could blow up in your face. Sorry, my puppy's being difficult. Okay, let's we got another question here from Anthony. Anthony asks, I have found that a competent and thorough account handoff process typically erodes the issue of overpromises. This is because we understand the account objectives, KPIs, etc. before the first client engagement. Thoughts on that panel? We 100% agree with you. As a matter of fact, we have an outcome-based selling training program where we talk about introducing customer success in the later stages of the sales cycle. Right. So that transition is absolutely seamless, but I couldn't agree with you more. Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
I think it's one of the hardest things to actually accomplish is coming up with a great handoff process between sales and CS. It's very, very difficult because you tote the line of what's too much, what's not enough, right? And then you're asking sales to do a lot. However, I agree 100% that being able to do this successfully, it creates and sets up the customer for success before you're even talking to them. On the enterprise side at Cobalt here, I do allow my CSMs to have conversations with potential prospects and customers so that they understand who they're going to be working with once that deal does close. So it's not a surprise face, right? We don't have an onboarding team, so their first line of defense is going to be CS after they sign that, that contract. And what we get from sales ultimately will inevitably set us up for success. So yes, I agree 100% that it alleviates a lot of issues that could arise if you have a successful handoff process.
Absolutely. I think also many times we think that what the customer expressed during the sales cycle is absolutely what they expect to get out of your services or your onboarding. And when you sell, you are framing, your services and your products in a specific way because you're trying to leverage the sale. That doesn't mean that you're setting the wrong expectations. Is that the true questions about outcomes and, goals that your customer has, meaning setting those KPIs, can only happen after the sale has been completed, now that the customer completely understands the product that they got their hands on. And that's the perfect time to have that discussion before you start the onboarding process. Because then there's a misunderstanding. And I think a lot of the times it's also that change management that you have to insert into the process so the customer knows that there's going to be a change process as they move through, implementing your products or services. Because we're not change managers, we're change enablers. They're going to have to do the change management on their side. So we have to make sure that they understand that they're going to go through that path with us. It leads to, I think, a better understanding of how are they going to get to the goal instead of waiting until you have done all the onboarding and then asking them, oh, what are your goals? It's too late, So for me, that conversation is very important.
It's huge. It's huge. When we were doing a lot of consulting before we rolled out the training program, one of the things that we found vast majority of situations where we walked into a company and there was a problem with churn, that the root of it was the handoff, was the misset expectations in that whole process, and the handoff was not done well. So that's huge. And to your point, Carla, you want to get out of the gate, right, with a lot of momentum, a lot of excitement, going off in the right direction, because you're going to spend a lot more time and a lot more energy farther down the road trying to course correct. Yes. In addition to all the change management stuff that you're trying to enable. How do you want me as a key stakeholder to drive change when I'm even suspecting whether you can do what we want you to do? Right? You've eroded the trust. Absolutely. Because what you said you would do in the promise phase is not what you can do in the reality phase, right? Or there's a mismatch. Anthony, thanks for that. Thanks for that question. Leah asks, I agree that as a CSM, we do our best to help and find solutions for our clients, as well as understanding what their expectations are. However, sometimes there aren't any possible solutions for their needs. How would you approach this conversation where your product or solutions simply cannot offer what they are expecting?
Be transparent.
Yeah.
I mean, that
sounds like you signed a bad fit customer.
Yes.
You know,
not all customers are good customers, and that's the reality, and you have to be okay with that, right? Now, if this is the first interaction you've had with the customer, it might be a little bit difficult to say that, right? But if this is, a customer of yours that you've had for a while, and the expectation alignment, maybe you got a handoff from a different CSM, and now this is you, or you're the CSE, and you're having a conversation because CSM passed it over to you. The reality is if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. And this goes back to being okay with delivering difficult messages and being okay with saying no. I think you always will need to do your best to try and strive. And I think that's always, what is the outcome that you're trying to accomplish here, right? Can we do it a different way? Always try to go that route. And I think we as CSMs always tried to do that. But inevitably, there's going to be the case where you just can't do it and you can't please them. So I think you need to have a real sit down, hard conversation with, whether it's your boss, whether it's sales, and say, hey, look, this customer is just not a good fit. What is it that we're going to be able to do for them? Because unfortunately, you can't please everybody in that regard.
Well, I think the conversation needs to be with sales. And I think that the conversation with the customer needs to include sales.
Yes.
If they signed that bad of a fit of a customer, once again, we don't want to throw them under the bus, but at the same time, they're throwing us under the bus if they expect us to be the one that delivers that bad news.
Or they're throwing you to the wolves.
Yeah, pretty much.
But yeah, I agree. I think that's a conversation that you need to have internally to understand how did we get here and what do we do? It's not a conversation that you want to have alone with the customer, because obviously the expectation was not set by you. Unless it was set by you, then you have to own it. But definitely you have to talk to your team and see how are you going to wiggle out. But at the end of the day, I think we just have to be transparent. If your organization still wants to move forward and continue the commitment that cannot be met, then I will say that's a conversation that is going to have to happen at a higher level with the customer.
Sorry, I'm having a difficult conversation with my puppy, and I'm regretting having him in my office for this call.
Anita, I just wanted to say something to this question, and that is about respect, and even respecting that the situation is as it is, the transparency. But underneath that transparency, I found is respect, and so that the customer knows, like, okay, if this isn't a good fit, it's much better to hear that early on, if possible, or if, something has changed, versus I think Jonathan had mentioned earlier, kind of just trying to, yes, Band-Aid solutions, all of those things as a way to try to make them into a good fit customer. In many ways, it's just more respectful to come out and say, like, this is just not. It's hard to have this conversation, Andrew. I got a cute puppy on the screen.
You can't have fur babies on the screen, Andrew.
Sorry, I got a request to see the fur baby. Sorry.
That's okay, Kathleen. You're forgiven. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say on that. That really, that's what's happening.
Yeah, you need to respect your customer. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Leah, thank you for the question. By the way, just a reminder, we do go until 15 past the hour. So we will go as long as we have questions or until 15 past the hour, whichever comes first. Lorenzo asks, what if the client has a big account with us? However, as they already know that, they still send hooks when trying to get new service, saying things like, hey, I'm ready to renew your service for another year and I'm willing to pay that $300 fee, when they clearly know that the cost of the service charge is $500, but they keep saying they deserve better because of the status of their account and they already have a big discount. I think that would be a relatively straightforward conversation. You've got the best, you're one of our largest customers, you got the best discount we have to offer. And
that goes back to the, you need to understand where the customer is and who they are, and they need to also understand who they are and what our business looks like, right? I can't give a discount, and I'm very comfortable saying no to discounts. I hate discounts personally. I believe that we provide a service and we need to be paid for the service that we're going to do for you, right? A partnership can't be driven off of a discount. It can't be driven off of what can you do for me today and what are you going to be able to do for me next year? It's more so, hey, what is the reason we're here? Why do we have a partnership? And are we providing you exactly what you've asked for in the past? And is the value there? It has to be a value-driven conversation, not a dollars-driven conversation. I tell all of my CSMs, do not get into the dollars. You don't need to have that conversation. A renewal should happen seamlessly. We shouldn't have to have a conversation about how much it costs because we've given them the value, right? And if it has to go down to that, hey, honestly, we're adding to our product what we're delivering to you every single year. You guys already have a discount that we're keeping in place. And sometimes I get difficult with them and I'm hard on them and saying, hey, we could increase your price and you're asking for more of a discount. When the reality is, we could be increasing your price for all that we are continuing to do. We want to provide more to you. And if you enjoy this partnership, you need to appreciate the partnership and not expect a nickel and dime us every single year. And I've seen most times it comes from procurement. It doesn't come from your end user. Also be empathetic with that. The ask usually is coming from somebody else other than the person you're speaking to, right? And I try to get to that person first. Let me talk to procurement. I love procurement conversations. Most people hate them. I love it. It's like you can push on them because they don't necessarily understand the value. Where your person, if they're your champion, they'll go to bat for you.
So I learned a long time ago when I'm dealing with, in situations where I'm dealing with procurement, that I always goose my price about 5% so they can achieve what they're looking to achieve and give them the, okay, I'll give you that 5% discount. But to your point, the business typically understands the value of what you're providing.
Yeah.
I come from procurement. So when I was at Four Seasons, I was with procurement. So I know how to unwrestle. It's what we do. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's your desired outcome.
Yeah.
Right? So let's say, I learned long ago, I'm kind of going to empathize with the perspective of the procurement folks. What are they trying to achieve? They're trying to achieve a discount. That's how they are measured. Whether it's part of their comp plan or not, there's an expectation that you're getting the best price. Okay, so let's just pad our pricing then.
Exactly. That's your goal, is to save the company money in procurement. So you're going to try it. And so, like you said, it's about value. For me, it's about our partnership's already here. Are we going to have expansion? Then let's talk about, how we move forward instead of trying to discount what you already have in front of you. Yeah. Because I'm not delivering less value to you. Therefore, I don't need to discount what I'm already giving.
And this is where the whys can play a role. So why are you asking to discount? Are you not getting the value that I thought you were getting?
Exactly.
Yeah, I was just going to say to that, the other thing about discounts is that, oh, great, you get a discount, it's forgotten about, it's moved, you just move on from it. When you talk about the value conversation, that helps strengthen and deepen the relationship moving forward. Like you forget that you get a discount as soon as you got it. You might celebrate it for 2 seconds and then you've moved on. But when it's focusing on the value, then again, that's building the relationship toward not just currently and what they've received in the past, but also toward the future. And so I agree with having the money conversations. Find out what's driving it, and then see if you can pivot that conversation away from money. Because really, again, it's that's all it is. Money comes, money goes, but that value is really where the impact is. And so the focus on that can make that conversation, maybe even in the future, not quite be as big of a conversation as it may be right now.
Well, like what Jonathan said, our relationship, our partnership should not be based on you nickel and diming me. That is not a partnership. We know what that is. That's a vendor customer relationship.
Yeah.
And to
Well,
get
and it lacks respect, really.
Yeah.
It does. If and then you have to ask the question, if it's that vendor, customer relationship, then why has it gotten to that? Why do they have that view? It just begs that question. And maybe there's other conversations that need to be had to figure out either, if it wasn't that way, why it suddenly became that way. Or if it's a newer customer, it's just finding out again what their expectation is and why this positioning. I think it just opens up great opportunity to dig deeper and find out what's really going on.
Yeah.
And to get ahead of that, one thing I would say is, if you know you're nearing a renewal, it's the perfect opportunity for a business review, because that's where you show the value that you're giving your customer. Show the metrics, let the numbers speak for themselves. And then you can have that value conversation ahead of talking about the commercial conversation that will have, the contract renewal. When you do that, then your customer already knows, hey, you know what? I'm getting value. And now it's much more of a challenge to talk about discount me, but for what? We have showed you the value that we're giving. We talk about the value. We talk about your goals. What is driving now that discussion? And I think that is very powerful, because you are having a proactive approach to the conversation.
Yeah, and I think
Sorry, go ahead, Jonathan.
I was gonna say, I think, you mentioned, Andrew, the desired outcomes. Maybe it's somebody that's coming in at the C level that is brand new. There was a lot of turnover, and one of their desired outcomes is to bring costs down for everybody. So they are merely just asking you for a discount because they want to. There may be no other rhyme or reason behind it, but as a CSM, I think that's part of our job to understand and uncover that, right? And showing the value. And honestly, we try to say ourselves, hey, we're not salespeople, sales folks and we're CSMs, but ultimately you always need to be selling, right? Always be selling. So you may need to resell your product and what you do. So you really need to button that up and have the ability to show your value in that way as well. And I think calling people out on that, and being straight to the point and not being afraid to challenge a C-level person because they're asking for a discount, very difficult. It's very hard to feel like you're challenging someone who you already know is above your pay grade at their company. You feel like that may be very difficult. Like, maybe I need my manager to come in and really push on that C-level person. No, I think as a CSM, you should feel empowered and confident enough and have enough faith in the value that you've already shown that customer to be able to do that yourself.
This would be a great place to bring in some prep, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Having these are the things that, and how we're giving value and tie it to their metrics, their outcomes, all of those things before you go in, especially if you're dealing with the C level.
Well, we talk about, Jonathan, as you know, in level 2 in our renewals and our expansion courses, we talk about the 4 Ds, right? You got to deliver the value. You have to demonstrate the value. You then have to distill the value. You need to disseminate that value to all the people. And so when you have a new person come in, you got to go through that process again and make sure that they understand the value that they've received, right? So we can avoid that situation from happening. But if it pops up like right at the time of a renewal, like you said, Carla, you got to get on and do a business review. Hey, this is the amount of courses that your team has consumed, and I understand that your retention number has increased, right? So your team has progressed, and so we can draw a connection. I think it's not a big jump to draw a connection between what your team has been taught versus your increased retention. So.
There was a question in the chat I saw but how did you measure value when it's not about revenue? Well, there's so many things that you can do. Are you impacting efficiencies? Are they seeing labor costs, for example, because of using your products or services? So it's not all about revenue, because people think of revenue just on money, like immediate cost savings, but they don't see it. Sometimes the cost savings can be on labor or can be on the time spent doing a manual task. If your product is automating, look at that, and you can use baselines. You can understand how your customer base is transacting, and then develop from there what will be a benchmark, and from there measure your customers. That's something that we do, because if you just try to drive it based on if apparent cost saving, for example, how much are they spending? How do you know how much they were spending before? It's kind of difficult to do that. So if you're the whole value prop of your solution is to create efficiencies or automation reduce costs, reduce labor. That's what you should be measuring. But it's also important, on the same vein, to have that conversation with your customer to understand what are their goals at the beginning of the engagement. Because if you think that their KPIs are one thing and then at the end of the engagement is something different, you have already a disconnect.
Well, I think you want to keep in mind that the company, a key stakeholder, a set of key stakeholders has pushed the company, pushed the CFO, pushed the CEO to make a purchase. They have a vested interest in helping you distill that value that's been created. Companies don't spend money just to spend money, right? That key stakeholder has put their neck out on the line and said, I want to go with this solution because I think that they're going to add value. Well, then that's the individual you should be looking at and saying, okay, help me figure out how I can demonstrate that value.
Create that champion, right?
Yeah.
Having a champion at a company, it's still a game changer to bring that value to the forefront of how it's impacting the business. Because the reality is we're not on those front lines at the business that actually purchased our product or our services, for that matter. We don't know, right? And we don't know if that person who brought us in originally is still there, right? So you need to create champions. You need to have more than one. I tell all of my team members, have more than one champion. If you have one, you're doing yourself a disservice, because if that person goes, who are you going to lean on? Now you have to literally start from the beginning. And that's an even more difficult task than just having a difficult conversation, right? So having at least 3 champions at every company, I think it goes a long way.
Yeah, we have an exercise we do in one of our classes, this influence plan, where I send people off and I say, okay, I want you to pick a couple of customers and list all the people that you have contacts with at the companies. When there are 2 or fewer, that's a yellow flag. When you have one person on that list, that's a big red flag.
Agreed.
Right? You got to have lots of champions. Sorry, go ahead, Carla.
I was going to say, and create your governance body that is going to be from the beginning to the end, because that helps position the roles of your stakeholders that are involved, from the executive sponsor, which is the person that you typically consider your champion, because that person is the one that's going to be measured on the success of the project. So have your, your executive sponsor, your working teams, but that way you have different sets of champions, the ones that are actually using the solution all the time and the ones that are overseeing the success of it. So do create that sort of like chart of what is that governance that you have, and make sure that people understand the roles that they will have throughout the project and the lifetime, not only when it's onboarding, but also in sustainment, because that helps you position value differently to them.
Yes, very much so. They have a vested interest.
Yes.
They definitely have a vested interest, and especially when they're named into that type of governing body.
Yeah.
Kathleen asks, do you have a tip or a play that you use to break news that is unfavorable to a client, but still keep them as a customer if possible? Just any expert advice on softening the blows. I usually try the empathetic route. Is always the best route, though? Any thoughts?
Well, from my perspective is, again, plan, but don't script it, just plan it. And then understanding what is it that you're going to impact when you're delivering this bad news, because you have to understand how it's going to impact your customer, not you, but the customer. What is it going to impact them? And acknowledge from their perspective that you know and you understand what it's going to be. So there's a little bit of empathy in there, but I think it's also a lot of thinking how you can remedy or provide an alternative solution if possible. And if it's just flat out bad news, it's just really about being direct and not mince words. But I always think, is there an alternative that I can give to something that I'm not going to be able to deliver?
Yeah, I would say think about other avenues in aspects of that business, of that customer, and where can we shed some value, right? Not everything is going to be perfect. However, there are other avenues that you may not have thought about or have spoken about that could be beneficial, or that you can impact in a positive light, right? So maybe an ask, we just can't do it, and that's fine, right? Being empathetic, obviously you always want to do that, and definitely understand, hey, this is the customer's pain points, this is what they're trying to accomplish, right? But trying to understand their business a little bit more, right? Ask them to have a conversation before you're about to deliver bad news. Have a whole separate conversation and let them talk about their business, what their needs are, what they're trying to do, because if you uncover certain things, you may be able to shed some light or help somewhere else, so that when you're giving the bad news, you can follow up with the positive. But what I heard in the last conversation we have, I can bring this to the the table, right? That is going to help the partnership. So then maybe you'll be able to keep them as a customer because you can help somewhere else that maybe they weren't initially thinking that you were going to be about. Maybe there's a service that is in the background at your company that isn't on your website and you're not necessarily pushing it, but you can still do it. We all have those. There are certain things that we're able to do that we can do. So showing the value outside of just what the ask is, I think definitely helps with softening the blow, but it's not always easy.
And I was going to say, one of the tools we teach in the course is called a positive spin. And it is meant to be used after you have to lay out that difficult news, whatever it may be, and then, spin it to something that's a little more positive. Of course, though, before you do that, you always want to make sure that the customer is able to respond and give them the space. You don't just deliver the bad news and then off to something positive. You got to give it. This is where that stop talking would work really well, to just allow them, because this is the first time they might be hearing this, right? You may know, and you may have known for a while, but this is the first time they're hearing it, and they need a few moments to process. So again, that stop talking using a bit of silence can be super helpful to let them absorb that. And then you can, as Jonathan and Carla mentioned, you can focus on other areas after that.
Yeah, I coach people. I used to coach folks that reported to me all the time. Bring me solutions, not problems. And I mean that in the way of, think about, the situation that you have, and are there alternative ways? Are there alternative things that we can do, right? The customer wants to get from point A to point B. We can't get them straight from point A to point B, but maybe we can get them from point A to point B through point C, right? And it's not something that they necessarily thought of, that they necessarily knew. And so you got to pause, take a step back. You want to empathize, right? One of the other things when you have to deliver that type of challenging news that I always find to be, that I've always found to be helpful is to role play. Is to sit down with somebody, explain to them, this is who the person is, this is how they think. I'm going to, I want you to empathize with them. And I'm going to deliver this news, or I want you to deliver the news to me because I know this person, and it's going to force me to think about how would I respond. Once again, back to what you said, Carla, from the beginning, it's all about preparation.
Yeah. And, take the time once you have to deliver bad news to reflect and learn from the experience, because I think we move too fast. We're like, oh my God, that was horrible. And then you just move on. But if it didn't go well, what could have changed, not necessarily change the outcome, you're still going to deliver the bad news, but what could have made the conversation maybe less challenging, or, what did you learn in the process that you didn't know? And use that with your team members. I say, if you have a team meeting, I like to open the line during the team sessions. And if there's something that we can learn from each other, I mean, sometimes I learn from my team, who happens to be on the call, so I'm very happy they're here. But learning from your own team is also very helpful, because they might have gone through a situation that you haven't, or you can use that to grow the skill of yourself and your team members.
Okay, we got about 5 minutes left. We got 6 unanswered questions. Let's see if we can do a little bit of a flash round here. So anybody who has anything to add, jump in right away. Keith asks, do you change your tactics for having difficult conversations based on different personalities? If so, have you found specific tactics for different personas?
Absolutely. You cannot approach every conversation the same way. You have difficult personalities. If you know them, procurement personalities are totally different than end user personalities. So yes, you definitely need to cater your conversation accordingly. And you need to be comfortable with having an even more difficult conversation with potentially C-level people, because they may push back on you, and they're not afraid to push back on you as you're pushing back on them. So yes, I'm not going to get too long-winded, but the short answer to the long-winded one is yes, definitely.
Anita? You got anything to add?
Yeah, I fully agree. And you have to know what's important for each individual going into this. Is part of that prep that Carla had mentioned.
Empathy, right?
Yep. And absolutely. Because for C-level, they're going to want to see different things, and, maybe more focus on metrics than perhaps someone else that you might be speaking to. So
know your audience.
You have to really tailor it to them so that it lands, because otherwise, you're really, the conversation ends up falling a bit flat.
Exactly. Carla, anything to add?
Yeah, I will say try to do a stakeholder mapping exercise so you know what drives each of the stakeholders.
Yep.
If it's level, it's always going to be metrics, finance, metrics, procurement, savings. So think through that and how you map your stakeholders, and that helps you prepare for the conversation better.
Awesome. Thanks, Keith. Christine asks, agree not everyone is a good fit. Curious to how you justify this to the C-suite when the company's an early stage startup and trying to keep growing the customer base. I've been there. I've done that. Sometimes you do unnatural things, but you at least need to understand going into it that the customer is a bad fit. And you need to be prepared to do something about that, right? Are we going to throw additional services at them? Are we going to make roadmap changes? But you need to be really upfront with the customer. It can't be, hey, here's a customer, and then you go in and find out, oh my God, they're a horrible fit. Right?
Yeah, I know startups have a challenge. You don't want to fire your customers because you need the revenue. But at the same time, if you brought the wrong fit into, and you already signed the deal with them, what concessions could you make that don't jeopardize the actual revenue component? There are things that you can give away, for example, training or documentation or translations. I don't know, whatever it might be. But if you already brought it, it's difficult, as a startup to say, you know what, I'm going to fire them because they're a bad fit. Yeah. But again, I go back to the transparency and having that respectful conversation, that Anita was talking about is, be transparent of what you can deliver and what you cannot, because otherwise you're going to disappoint them.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think the question here is like, hey, how do you justify it to your own C-suite too? That's part of the question. And I think honestly, use it as a coaching or a training opportunity, right? If it's a startup, you have no idea what your ICP, your ideal customer profile is. Use it as a training internally to do that, to come up with some, hey, this doesn't fit our ICP. What do we want our ICP to be? This type of customer didn't work. This type of customer did work. So now you're showing your value as a CSM. You could be an individual contributor, but you're showing that value to your company. It only is going to benefit you in the long run, but it'll benefit the company as well.
Jonathan, you took it right out of my mouth. And then, of course, if you can, cross-functionally to marketing and sales, to show them what the difference is. Because again, they're focusing on very different metrics to get leads in versus, they may not know how long these customers stay around and why they're a bad fit. But you can make a very strong case, which of course then marketing loves, because customer acquisition costs go down. And for sales, the sales become easier because now they are talking sort of the customer's language. So if you could make a case for it, it makes it much better all around.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. That's all the time we got. We're at the end of our time we got for today. I think it was a great conversation. But it's not what I think. It's not what we think. It's what all of you think. So please let us know by posting your feedback on LinkedIn and tagging either myself or our guests or Success Coaching. I want to thank my amazing panelists for spending the time with us today. Thank you all for making the time. Great conversation. I said that on Monday when we met to do the prep that I thought would be a great conversation. I never imagined that we'd have so many people show up. It's awesome. One final note, great CSMs know they don't have all the answers, but they know where to get them. That's why we created this CSM Mastermind series, to harness the knowledge and experience of the community to help improve everyone. We hope to see you again at our next event on May 18th, when we're going to discuss the key soft skills for CSM success with Celie Gouvier from Whisk, Jonathan Bernos from InStructure, and Marie Vlad from Glia. Until then, make sure to make space for yourself every day and your mindset every single day, and have a great rest of your day, week, and month, everybody.